Welcome back to Archives Live. My name is Libby and I am the digital storytelling intern for the OSU Archives here at the library. Thank you for joining our live stream today. I'm joining you all from the front entrance of the Food and Agricultural Products Center. With Thanksgiving coming up, we thought it would be interesting to discuss food and farming here at OSU. OSU has been able to contribute to agriculture in the state of Oklahoma and has had a hand in the farm-to-table process for Oklahoma citizens. This month, we have guest interviewee Rodney Holcomb, agricultural economics professor and extension specialist at FAPSI, along with David Peters, to discuss this part of OSU's history. With that being said, let's get right into it. So David, tell me a little bit about OAMC in its infancy. What were its early goals in terms of agriculture?
So what most people don't realize is Payne County is 90% rural in 1890. And so the citizens of Stillwater wanted the college. The citizens of Payne County wanted the agricultural experiment station. So our original 200 acres, only about 10 acres is the campus for the college. The other 190 acres, 95% of it, is allocated for experiments, okay? So they're beginning to try to grow whatever crops they can. They're bringing in crops from neighboring states. They're bringing in crops from around the United States, even Europe. And so they're trying different crops. We have an orchard, we have a vineyard, we have fruit trees just north of where Morrill Hall is now, and we have livestock. And so the farmers of Payne County wanted to know what was going to be successful at the Agricultural Experiment Station before they invested a lot of time and effort. Because remember, they've just been established there the year before. And for many, it's subsistence. They're just trying to survive. And so they're looking at how they can do that, and they're looking for guidance from the college.
Nice. And what advantages did OAMC take in the early years to shape such a successful agriculture program?
So we're doing the testing for them, and then we're making recommendations out from the experiment station. We're having farmers come visit campus. They can see production in progress. And so it's really a combined effort. We're working with farmers, figuring out what they need, hearing from them what they're requesting, and then trying to address those needs with them. So that's early on. We're trying a lot of things. One of the first plots, the Magruder plots, established 1892. The first continuous wheat trials west of the Mississippi River. They're still going 130 years later. And so we're testing to see how things are going to work so that we can make appropriate recommendations for farmers in this area.
And along with that last question, what other disciplines at OAMC's campus became involved in agricultural production?
So initially, there's the production side of it. You're trying to produce the product, grain, livestock. But then you have to think about how are you going to preserve that material? How are you going to distribute that material? How are you going to then prepare recipes that are nutritional? And one of the key things is how are you going to prepare for months when you're not going to have food sources? So canning and those kinds of activities. And so the human sciences, now we used to call it home economics, but they get involved and they reach out to the women. And initially we're mostly working with male farmers, but we're realizing women have an integral part in this, in the whole food processing, food preparation aspect. And so we begin to integrate other areas of the disciplines on campus into this whole system.
It seems like everyone at OAMC kind of got involved in the processing, but they also may have been involved in the presentation. And so we do have something from the archives today. We have ice cream or butter molds. So David, if you would like to kind of talk to us about the history of these, how they came about, how we acquired them in the archives, like one.
So developed later, and we have about 5 or 6 of these different molds. But it was a way for presenting ice cream or butter. We used to have banquets, a number of banquets on campus. A popular location was the Student Union, that large area on the second floor. But in the presentation of the food product, just a slab of butter is not, it's okay, it's probably delicious, but they would look at ways of presenting the product. And so that's why they created these molds. And we have a variety of different forms. We have a swine, a pig, a rooster. We have Old Central. We have St. Nick. And so it was just a way of presenting food, in this case, ice cream or butter. I think these probably came from the 30s and 40s. So this is long after the early establishment of the college. But our dairy department was very active for a number of years, and this came out of the dairy department. So,
I love these. I love the Old Central one. It's my favorite because the details are so good. So fun. Thank you, David. If you are just now joining us on the live stream here, I'm with David Peters and Rodney Holcomb discussing the history of how food gets from the farm to your table here at OSU. If you have any questions, please place them in the comment section and David will try to answer them on our show today. So Rodney, what does the Food and Agricultural Products Center do?
The Food and Agricultural Products Center is really an idea that stemmed 30 plus years ago from this concept of we grow a lot of agricultural commodities, but most of them go outside the state for any kind of further processing. We may get the food products back in the grocery stores, but for the most part, our biggest commodities all go outside of the state. So the concept was, can we find more ways to make use of the things we grow in Oklahoma? And through processing technologies, packaging technologies, or even presentation, be able to provide more of these products in Oklahoma to Oklahoma residents, but also look at the market opportunities to take some of these new product ideas nationally or internationally.
And what is the history of your team here at FAPSI? What are some projects you've enjoyed working on in the past?
FAPSI's been in operation for almost 25 years now, so we're not exactly the new kids on the block, but we have had some great experiences. And we're a combination of folks. I'm an agricultural economist, but just down the hall from me, our business and marketing specialist, but we also have food scientists, process engineers, meat scientists, horticultural products processing specialists, microbiologists. All of these people work as a team, either collectively or in smaller groups as need be for client purposes, to meet the needs of the Oklahoma food processing industry, to come up with new products and ideas. Now, some of the interesting products we've had over the years, one of the first ones that we considered a success in this center is one that most people wouldn't have even thought about, but it was a pet turtle treat made out of waste fruits and vegetables and worms and minnows. And it was for a producer in eastern Oklahoma that was one of the biggest growers of box turtles for the pet industry. And he was trying to find ways to make use of products that otherwise would have gone to a landfill and turn them into a valuable product that would keep all these pet turtles healthy. And then lately, the products have varied. One of the more interesting ones we've had, if you've been on campus and smelled some that smell like burning hair, it was edible beef hides, which in Western Africa is quite a thing. But to take the beef hides and rather than dry them down and tan them into leather, you actually process the beef hides into an edible product.
Nice. So explain the process of getting food from the farm to the table on a basic level.
Okay. We talk about farm to table more as a modern concept. Truth be told, the things that we do that we call farm to table now in the 21st century is exactly what Oklahoma A&M was doing 100 years ago. Smaller scale poultry production, small orchard production, farmers markets, truck markets. These are the kinds of things that the university started out doing. But farm to table is the foundational concept of agriculture as we know it. Always has been. Now the farms have changed and the tables have changed. There's about 6 billion more mouths at the table now than there was when Oklahoma A&M first started. But it still operates the same way. Can we feed people? So we have a lot of products that come in, and we work with folks around Oklahoma all the time that are looking at new ideas, new products, and you're always wondering what's going to be the next product. So we walk them through the concept of providing a safe and reliable quality of food product to the consumer, including all the regulatory requirements at the FDA level or the USDA level, and helping them find or examine all their options for processing, packaging, and distribution.
Yes. One of my questions today was, if you have an idea, and we're surrounded by a lot of products that came from Oklahoma residents. And so if you kind of have an idea for a product and you're an entrepreneur here at OSU, what are the kind of steps you have to go through to see your product on the Thanksgiving table?
Every other month we offer a workshop here. It's called Basic Training, a guide to starting your food business. And we have farmers, but we also have people that just have a great idea for a recipe. Maybe it's grandma's recipe for whatever, and they want to commercialize it because they've been told for years this is something that they thought people would buy in the store. And we spend an entire day with those folks. We bring in folks from the state agriculture department, from the health department, and we talk about everything that it takes to go from this concept to a full-fledged operational business, meeting all the food safety requirements and pursuing your market opportunities, whether they be in the retail supermarket, the farmer's market, or in a restaurant.
I was having a conversation with someone here in the building previously, and I thought it was so interesting how you guys work with people through those steps where if they have an idea on a small scale recipe, how do you take that flavor, that taste, and give that to a much larger audience, a much bigger crowd? I always thought that was interesting and something you may not think about if you just have a homemade recipe, you know.
That's true.
But thank you all so much for joining us again. If you've just tuned in, I'm with Head of Archives David Peters and Rodney Holcomb discussing the history of agriculture here at OSU. Feel free to leave questions or comments in the comments section to keep the conversation going. So Rodney, how do you see OSU's land grant mission being lived out in your team today?
You know, as I said earlier, agriculture, the foundational premise of agriculture has always been about connecting the farm to the table. And we're still doing that today. And we're looking for all the different ways that we can do that. Because as we talked about over years, the farms have changed. The technology, much of which may have been developed here at Oklahoma State University, but the technology of farming has changed. The demands of the consumer have changed considerably. We were talking about this earlier. 100 years ago, we had Quaker Quick Oats being introduced. That's our predecessor to our modern instant oatmeal. And now we have oat milk. That's the big thing. So what's the consumer looking for? Now, when Oklahoma A&M first started, you didn't have too many consumers out looking for certified organic quinoa or hydroponically raised kale. But we have all these things now. People, they want to take a little flavor of something from this culture and a little flavor of something from that culture. And we want to see, can we produce that here? If you want it local, let's see if there's the opportunity to do that. If you want it packaged, prepared, and available in a certain format or venue, then we look at the opportunities to do that.
We've got some questions from the audience today. So Bonnie asks, what are some of the interesting food products that OSU has helped to develop?
I think one of the most interesting ones that you can't find it on the store shelf right now, but one of the things that came up in the early years was peanut butter slices. And if you think of a Kraft cheese single, that sort of thing in just a plastic wrap, imagine that with peanut butter. So you always have the exact same amount and no mess. No mess all over your fingers, that you could put that on a piece of bread and prepare your lunch. That was marketed across much of the U.S. for a while. For various reasons, it's not on the marketplace right now, but it's still being considered. So that's one example of an interesting product that has come up. I think we're sitting actually in front, most people may not even think about this, but all the wines that we see grown in Oklahoma now. Before Prohibition, Oklahoma had many, many vineyards and produced a lot of wine. But after Prohibition, it never happened until law changes at the end of the 20th century provided opportunities. So each one of these bottles you see behind you here is just an example of one of the many new products that have come up out of here.
Still trying to wrap my mind around a slice of peanut butter. I mean, I thought we were pushing it with the squirt bottles of both, but wow.
Before Prohibition, we had a vineyard on campus. And so we were producing grapes and recommending grape varieties for production in Oklahoma. So
I just cannot imagine that. And William wants to ask today, are there any products developed through FAPSI that have become staples in your home?
Ooh, staples in my home. That's a good question. You know, I would hate to say that they're products that we developed here, but the Food and Ag Product Center works, and that was the nature of this center being established, that it would work with the food industry in Oklahoma. So there are many, many food companies. There's even what's called the MIO, or Made in Oklahoma Coalition. And there are many of the products that maybe versions of the product, packaging forms of the product were developed here, but possibly not the product itself, but some version of it was generated here through our assistance to that company that have ended up in my home. And that may be, there are some companies in Oklahoma that make certain bacons, specific barbecue sauces, things like that. I do have some of those in the shelves.
Nice. And I've got some questions for both of you guys, if you both want to answer. Are there any figures that stick out in the history of OSU that have had a hand in shaping the farm-to-table process, either in FAPC or just in OSU's history?
Want to go first?
You know, I may throw this to you because you brought it up first.
Okay.
But there's one person that you and I had both talked about a minute ago.
Alexander Magruder, or
Well, he was one of them.
Okay.
Stan Gilliland.
Stan
was another
Gilliland
one as well.
He's a more recent one.
Absolutely.
Dr. Gilliland was very active in working with microbiome, or what the
Food microbiology
Yeah.
and a lot of the probiotics and beneficial microbes that we see in acidophilus milk, those kinds of things. Obviously Magruder, that's one that you can't think of OSU without thinking of the Magruder plots. If you're doing anything in agriculture, everybody knows the Magruder plots.
It was Alexander Magruder was the gentleman, and he was quite instrumental in the early experiment station. Another gentleman who early on was James C. Neal. He really established the experiment station here, and so you think he's trying to create a new entity on the plains of Oklahoma in 1891. W.L. Blizzard and Al Darlow in animal science, animal husbandry in their day, but improving all the livestock lines and making enhancements there. And then I think W.D. Bentley, really the first head of extension in Oklahoma. I mean, he brought extension to Oklahoma, and that critical role that extension plays in all of this in production. Grace Fernandez was a woman in human sciences, home economics, who was really early to realize the importance of women and the role they played in this whole food process, and doing surveys across the state of Oklahoma, finding out what their needs were and how to better meet those needs from the institution. So those are just a few of the folks that I think had significant roles early on and really built a foundation for where we are today.
Yeah, and if you could go back to extension and kind of explain that for the folks back home, because I know we've had an article about it in State Magazine, but I don't know if you wanted to develop more on what extension is.
So, initially our objectives were to provide educational opportunities for students and then engage in research to test things. Extension comes along as the third part of our triangle of our land grant mission, and that's to be able to share the information with the citizens of Oklahoma, in our case. And so we have a critical responsibility to work with the citizens across the state and trying to help them meet their needs, whatever they are. We focus, of course, on agriculture, but also we had engineering extension, we had human science extension. And so that extension of sharing that information through bulletins, through now TV and all kinds of formats, bringing people back to campus, encouraging farmers. We used to have farmer short courses here. They would come back. There would be an annual meeting where homemakers and farmers would return to campus for additional coursework and classes. And really that was instrumental in keeping that information flow with the citizens of Oklahoma, which we feel is one of our responsibilities.
Thank you. And how do both of you see OSU shaping the future of agriculture?
Well, when I started off, I said, 90% of Payne County citizens were living in rural areas, were farmers. Now for Oklahoma, I think it's less than 2% of our citizens are engaged in production agriculture. Others are engaged in agriculture in various other ways, but in the actual production, farmers are less than 2%. So these people are providing the food resources, not only for 98% of Oklahomans, but, across the United States, and in some cases the world. And so, it's just to think of those few people having such a large impact on our lives. I mean, just, if they didn't exist, we wouldn't exist much longer after that. And so we need to continue to make investments in their lives and how they do the things they do And really, it's a way of guaranteeing all of our existence is working through farmers.
I think one of the things we see, and going back to what David said, you go back to the history of the institution, and especially extension. You saw a lot of effort being made to explain to people how to better grow that small flock of poultry, or raise that small herd, or raise your horticultural crops, whatever the case may be. We changed as technology changed, and we saw much more of the outreach going towards larger agriculture, much more efficiency, and right down to the space age technology for precision farming and training people on that. We see a little bit of return coming back around. We tend to go in cycles in food and agriculture, so we see more of a return back to smaller scale production, but also alternative production. So urban farming, for example, horticulture, hydroponics, aquaculture, all these things that we wouldn't have been talking about in 1890, but those are things that are commonplace that we discuss now. And one of the ways that we actually see OSU helping agriculture today is to meet the ever-changing demands of consumers and the ever-changing requirements for selling a food product. For example, with the passage of the Food Safety Modernization Act of 2011, those fruit and vegetable farmers that are larger or selling commercially today, they're selling $30,000 or more a year of fruit and vegetable products, they're required to comply with certain food safety parameters. I mean, in 1890, you didn't have somebody going out to your farm and say, where are your records on the quality of the water you used to raise these fruits and vegetables? But you have to do that now. You have to have a food safety plan, which is something that they never had to do before. But that's part of the new world that we live in. The consumer wants it, the retailers and the restaurants want it, which means eventually the farmer's going to have to provide it. So as I said early on, the farms have changed over the years, the consumers have definitely changed over the years, and if one changes, the other's going to change to match. So we're seeing a continued and long-term need for OSU, both on the research and the outreach side and the educational side for the young people coming through the programs today.
Yeah, and you're talking a lot about change and parameters and different things like that. And I know we had a conversation before the live stream about kind of challenges FAPC has been dealing with in terms of COVID. I don't know if you had an insight on the changes that we're seeing because of COVID in the industry.
In the food industry, COVID's had quite a bit of impact. So and we were talking about this before the program started, just about the meat industry itself. We see kind of that bottleneck of the meat industry from the large processors. And the biggest reason why is large processors who are extremely efficient, but still require a lot of manpower, a lot of human capital to crank out a safe meat product. Those folks work very closely with one another. And when you start putting in space between them, then all the efficiencies that these $100, $200 million facilities have been designed for has almost been lost because of that one thing, just the need to have that many people working close enough together to maintain the efficiencies of throughput. But the same thing happens in fruit and vegetable industry as well.
Thank you. Well, I have one last question before we head off, before we go off for Thanksgiving break, and I just wanted to know what food you guys are most excited for to see on the dinner table.
I have a sweet tooth. I'm going straight for the dessert table, and I shouldn't, but what I look forward to every year at Thanksgiving are the pies. Pecan, pumpkin, sweet potato, and one of my all-time favorites, which is just kind of an old school type of poor people's pie, buttermilk pie. Can't get enough of it.
So I'm going to start off with the green bean casserole and sweet potatoes. And then I will head to the dessert table and join you for pumpkin pie, apple pie, pecan pie, especially if it's a fruit pie. But I love dessert too. But I enjoy Thanksgiving. I'm very appreciative of the bounty we have here. So, and the hands that prepare it. So.
Yes. Well, thank you, Rodney and David, for joining me today on Archives Live and being willing to dive deeper into this topic. I hope we all feel closer to our history after discussing the story of agriculture here at OSU. I know I have gained a deeper appreciation for the food I eat and can thank the folks here at FAPC and OSU for working so hard to put something healthy and meaningful on my plate. And of course, thank you to you, our viewers, for joining us and commenting or asking questions. Don't forget to check out all of the archives videos on OState TV and YouTube. The website will be listed at the end of this program. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next time on Archives Live.